The concealed bruise on her wrist should have been just another detail George overlooked. Another invisible mark on an invisible woman who cleaned his estate 3 times a week. But when Janet Crowell instinctively tugged her sleeve down as he entered the library, something primal and protective surged through him. He'd destroyed men for less than the flash of fear he glimpsed in her pale blue eyes. "Who did this to you?" His voice was deadly quiet, the same calm tone he used before issuing orders that ended careers, or lives. Janet's fingers trembled as she smoothed the fabric over the fingerprint-shaped bruises darkening her fair skin. "Nobody, Mr. Charles. I'm clumsy, that's all." George stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back. That small movement, that reflexive retreat, ignited something in him that had nothing to do with the empire he'd built through calculated ruthlessness and blood. For the first time in 20 years of controlling the city's underworld, George Charles felt completely, dangerously out of control. "Don't lie to me," he whispered, and the world shifted irrevocably between them. "Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're tuned in and excited for today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I've got another fascinating story coming your way that you definitely won't want to miss. Now, let's get back to the story. Janet had cleaned George's Beacon Hill mansion for 8 months without truly seeing him. He was a presence, tailored suits that cost more than her monthly rent, silent footsteps on marble floors, the scent of expensive cologne and danger that lingered in rooms after he left. She knew the important things. He paid triple the agency rate, never left messes, and expected invisibility. Invisibility was Janet's specialty. 32 years of survival had taught her how to move through spaces without disturbing the air. She made herself smaller in doorways, quieted her breathing around important people, perfected the art of being present without being seen. The bruises from last night should have been hidden beneath her long-sleeved uniform and carefully applied makeup, the drugstore concealer that never quite matched her skin tone but was all she could afford. Today, that careful invisibility shattered. She'd covered the damage as best she could. Foundation layered thick over the discoloration on her jawline. Sleeves buttoned tight at the wrists. But she'd had to reach for a book on the highest shelf, and the fabric had ridden up, exposing the purple and yellow evidence of hands that had gripped too hard. Her supervisor at Premier Home Services would fire her if clients complained. The rent was overdue by 3 days. She couldn't afford to lose this job, so Janet went to work. The mansion was silent when she arrived at 10 a.m., her usual time. George was never home during her shifts, a small mercy she'd counted on today. She moved through the expansive library with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the skyline spreading beneath like a kingdom. His kingdom, she'd heard the other housekeepers whisper. George Charles owned half the city's legitimate businesses and all of its secrets. The restaurants, the real estate developments, the private security firms, those were above board. Everything else existed in shadows. Janet didn't care about his business. She cared about the $350 weekly check that kept her fed and one step ahead of her past. She was dusting the mahogany shelves, leather-bound first editions and pristine hardcovers arranged with military precision, when she heard the door open behind her. Her heart seized. He was never home early. "You're still here." His voice came from behind her, smooth and precise, each word carefully chosen. British boarding school education layered over something rougher, something dangerous underneath. Janet turned slowly, keeping her bruised wrist angled away from view. "I apologize, Mr. Charles. I'll finish quickly. Look at me." It wasn't a request. George Charles didn't make requests. She raised her eyes and watched his expression shift from distant politeness to something sharp and focused. He crossed the room in 4 strides, Italian leather shoes silent on Persian rugs, and suddenly he was too close, his presence overwhelming the careful distance she'd always maintained. Up close, he was formidable. Sharp jawline shadowed with stubble, dark eyes that missed nothing, black hair styled with casual perfection. The top buttons of his crisp white shirt were undone, revealing the hollow of his throat and the edge of a tattoo she'd glimpsed before while changing his bedsheets, something intricate that disappeared beneath expensive fabric. "What happened to your face?" His hand lifted toward her jaw, then stopped mid-air, hovering, waiting for permission Janet didn't know how to give. "I fell." The lie tasted bitter, clumsy on her tongue. "I'm fine, really." George's eyes narrowed. In 8 months, she'd never heard him raise his voice, but the quiet in him now was more terrifying than any shout. "You fell," he repeated, each syllable weighted with disbelief. His gaze dropped to her left wrist. "And the bruises there?" She yanked her sleeve down, but it was too late. He'd seen everything. "Mr. Charles, I really should finish." "Sit." "I can't. I have 2 more houses after this, Anne." I said sit. Softer this time, but no less absolute. Janet perched on the edge of his leather reading chair, wrong in every way. Her discount store uniform. Her second-hand shoes. Her damaged face in his perfect space. She didn't belong here, not as anything other than invisible help. George stood before her, hands in his pockets, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm despite everything. "Tell me his name." "There's no one." "Janet." The way he said her name, careful, like something precious, stopped her breath. He'd never used her name before. Always, Miss Crowell, on the rare occasions he'd acknowledged her at all. "I've built my life on reading people. You're terrified, but not of me. That bruise is fresh. Someone hurt you, and recently." She stood abruptly. "With respect, Mr. Charles, my personal life isn't your concern. It became my concern the moment you walked into my home injured." He stepped closer, and she smelled bergamot and leather and something darker underneath, whiskey, maybe, or smoke. "Is it a boyfriend?" "No." "Husband?" "No." "Then who?" Janet met his eyes and saw genuine concern there, mixed with something that looked like barely restrained violence. "Why do you care?" "I'm just your maid." Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe hurt. "You think that's all you are? Isn't it?" George was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. "I notice everything in my space, Janet. 8 months ago, you started bringing fresh flowers. Cheap grocery store bouquets that you arrange in my kitchen when you think I won't see. You reorganize my books by color instead of by author because you think it looks warmer. You open the east windows exactly 4 inches because you've figured out I like fresh air but hate drafts." His voice dropped. "You hum when you work. Classical pieces, Chopin, mostly. Your mother's favorites, I think, because sometimes you get the notes wrong but you smile anyway." Janet's throat tightened. She'd thought herself invisible. "You're not just my maid," he continued, his dark eyes holding hers. "You're the only genuine thing in this house. The only person who moves through these rooms like they matter, like they're worth caring for." He paused. "You're the only real thing in my life." She couldn't breathe. "Mr. Charles." "The name. Give me the name of whoever did this." "I can't." "Can't or won't?" "Both." She grabbed her cleaning caddy with shaking hands. "I should go." His hand caught her wrist, the unmarked one, gentle but firm. "If you leave now, you're walking back into danger. Whoever hurt you will do it again." His thumb brushed over her pulse point. "I can protect you." "Your protection?" She almost laughed, the sound bitter in her throat. "You don't even know me. I know you work 3 houses a day to afford an apartment you're afraid to return to. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met." His grip tightened fractionally. "And I know I won't let anyone hurt you again." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat, and Janet realized with terrifying clarity that everything was about to change. The careful invisibility she'd cultivated, the safe distance she'd maintained, It was all crumbling under the weight of George Charles's absolute attention. And the most frightening part? She wasn't sure she wanted to stop it. Janet Crowell had perfected the mathematics of invisibility by the time she was 25. Move through spaces like water. Never make eye contact. Breathe quietly. Exist in the margins where wealthy people never looked. 7 years later, at 32, she'd turned survival into an art form. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the Beacon Hill Mansion. Tuesday, Thursday, the Brookline brownstone and the Back Bay penthouse. Weekends, whatever emergency calls came through Premier Home Services. $350 a week from George Charles alone. Enough to cover rent on her studio apartment in Dorchester, enough for groceries, enough to stay ahead of the creditors and the questions and the man who'd promised he'd find her if she ever ran. She'd been running for 3 years. The Beacon Hill Mansion was her favorite job, though she'd never admit it. 20 rooms of old money and older secrets, marble floors that echoed her footsteps, windows that overlooked the common like the house was watching over the city. George Charles was never home during her shifts, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like clockwork. She arrived after he left for wherever men like him went during daylight hours. She departed before he returned for whatever business he conducted after dark. She knew him only as a presence. The scent of bergamot cologne lingering in his bedroom. Expensive suits hanging in his closet with military precision, each one worth more than she made in a month. The Wall Street Journal left folded on his desk, articles about real estate acquisitions and corporate mergers. The staff, his driver, his assistant, the stone-faced men in dark suits who never quite looked like bodyguards but absolutely were, spoke in hushed tones and scattered when he approached. Janet cleaned around the evidence of his life without ever touching it. She learned his preferences through observation, windows open exactly 4 inches, books arranged by spine color, fresh flowers in the kitchen though he'd never requested them. She hummed while she worked, Chopin nocturnes her mother had played on their old piano before everything fell apart, and told herself this job was temporary. Just until she saved enough to disappear again. Somewhere farther this time. Somewhere he'd never find her. But temporary had stretched into 8 months, and 8 months had built a dangerous sense of safety. She'd let herself relax into the routine. Let herself believe the bruises from her past had finally faded. Yesterday proved how wrong she'd been. And today, George Charles had come home early. The elevator chimed at 11:47 a.m., and Janet's world tilted sideways. George Charles never came home before 3. Never. She'd built her entire schedule around his absence, counted on the empty house like she counted on gravity. But there he was, stepping into the library in his charcoal suit, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in clipped tones about offshore accounts and liability clauses. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. Janet froze with the feather duster in her hand, sleeves buttoned tight despite the warmth, makeup carefully applied over the shadow on her jaw. She'd thought it was enough. She was wrong. George ended his call without saying goodbye, his dark eyes tracking her with the precision of a man who'd built an empire on reading people. "You're still here. I apologize, Mr. Charles. I'll finish quickly." She turned back to the bookshelf, keeping her movements small, controlled. "Look at me." The command in his voice wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Janet turned, angling her body to hide the wrist, keeping her chin down to shadow the bruise. George crossed the room in 4 strides and suddenly the air felt thinner. "What happened to your face?" "I fell. Clumsy." The lie came out too fast. His jaw tightened. "And your wrist?" He nodded toward where her sleeve had written up slightly, exposing the edge of purple-yellow fingerprints. "Did you fall on that too?" Janet yanked the fabric down. "Mr. Charles, I really should." "Sit. I have other appointments." "Sit. Please." The softness of the last word undid her more than any command could have. She perched on the edge of his leather reading chair, wrong in every possible way. Her discount uniform against his $1,000 furniture. Her damaged face in his pristine world. George stood before her, hands in his pockets, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Tell me his name. There's no one. Janet. Her name in his mouth stopped her breath. He'd never used it before. I notice everything in my space. You bring cheap grocery store flowers and arrange them in the kitchen. You reorganize my books by color because you think it looks warmer. You open the east windows exactly 4 inches. His voice dropped. You hum Chopin when you work. Your mother's favorites, I think. The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd thought herself invisible. She'd been wrong about everything. You're not just my maid. You're the only genuine thing in this house. He crouched slightly, bringing their eyes level. Let me protect you. You don't know me. Then let me. Janet stood abruptly, grabbing her cleaning caddy. Our worlds don't work that way, Mr. Charles. But his hand caught her unmarked wrist, gentle and absolute. They do now. Janet returned on Wednesday, hoping Monday had been an aberration. George's car wasn't in the drive when she arrived, and relief flooded through her. She could clean, collect her check, and rebuild the walls he'd somehow breached. She was polishing the dining room table when she heard his footsteps. You came back. He stood in the doorway, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, dark jeans, white shirt with rolled sleeves revealing forearms marked with ink. I wasn't sure you would. It's my job, Mr. Charles. George. He moved closer. And we both know you could find other jobs. She focused on the mahogany grain beneath her cloth, saying nothing. He appeared again Friday. And the following Monday. Always home during her shifts now, always watching with those dark, assessing eyes. His presence should have made her nervous. Instead, it made her feel something she couldn't name, something dangerous. On the second Wednesday, she found him waiting in the kitchen, coffee made, her favorite grocery store flowers already arranged in a vase. You noticed, she said before she could stop herself. I always notice you, Janet. He gestured to a chair. Sit with me. 5 minutes. She should have refused. She sat. His name is David, she heard herself say. The words came slowly at first, then faster. The marriage that became a cage. The escalating violence. The night she finally ran with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's jewelry, pawned the next day for bus fare. 3 years of looking over her shoulder, building a quiet life in a new city, new name on her lease but old fears following her everywhere. He found me last week. Outside my apartment. Her voice cracked. He said he just wants to talk, but I know, I've seen what happens when David wants to talk. George's knuckles went white around his coffee cup. Where is he now? I don't know. That's what terrifies me. Give me his full name. Last known address. Any details you have. His voice had gone deadly calm, the same tone she'd heard him use on phone calls in his study, calls that ended with someone's business collapsing or reputation destroyed. I've seen what you are, Mr. Charles. Janet met his eyes. I've cleaned the rooms where you conduct business. I can't be part of that world. Then let me show you who I am when I'm not being what the world requires. He reached across the table, his hand hovering over hers. Have dinner with me. Tonight. Not as your employer. Just as someone who wants to know you. This is insane. Probably. His thumb brushed her knuckles, feather-light. Say yes anyway. Janet arrived at 7 wearing the only dress she owned, a simple navy sheath bought years ago for job interviews. She felt exposed without her uniform, without the invisible armor of being the help. George's chef had set the small dining room table with understated elegance, white linens, candlelight, wine she couldn't pronounce. George stood when she entered, and something in his expression made her breath catch. He looked at her like she was precious. "You're beautiful," he said simply. She flushed. "I'm out of place." "You're exactly where you belong." He pulled out her chair, and the reversal, being served rather than serving, made her hands tremble. The meal was exquisite, but Janet barely tasted it. George talked, and she found herself leaning forward, drawn into his words. He spoke of growing up in South Boston, watching his father lose everything to men who played by different rules. How he'd learned those rules, mastered them, built something untouchable. "I won't lie about what I am," he said, refilling her wine. "I've done things that would horrify you. But I'm not what you think, either. Every restaurant I own employs people who couldn't get hired elsewhere. Every building I develop includes affordable housing. I protect what's mine, maybe too fiercely, but I protect it. Why tell me this? Because you deserve the truth." His dark eyes held hers. "And because I'm tired of being alone in rooms full of people." The words resonated somewhere deep. "I know that feeling," she admitted. "I've been invisible so long, I forgot what it felt like to be seen. We're the same, you and I." George's hand crossed the table, covering hers. "You built a fortress of invisibility. I built one of power. Both designed to keep us safe. Both making us prisoners." His thumb traced circles on her palm, and heat spread through her. "When I look at you, Janet, I see someone who makes me remember why I wanted more than this life. You make me want to be the man I thought I'd left behind 20 years ago." She should pull away. Should maintain the distance between their worlds. Instead, she turned her hand over, lacing their fingers together. "This is insane," she whispered. "Completely." He stood, drawing her up with him, his other hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "Tell me to stop." She couldn't. Didn't want to. George kissed her, tentative at first, a question more than a demand. Janet's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, answering with everything she'd kept locked away. He tasted like wine and possibility and danger, and she'd never felt more alive. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "Stay," he murmured. "Let me keep you safe." 3 days after the dinner, Janet's phone rang at 6 a.m. Unknown number. "Ms. Crowell. Detective Morrison, Boston PD. We need to talk about David Hendricks and some allegations he's made." Her blood went cold. "What allegations?" "He claims he's been threatened by associates of George Charles. He's also filed a restraining order against you, citing harassment through third parties." The detective's voice was flat, professional. "We need you to come in today." Janet's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She went straight to the mansion, bypassing her schedule entirely. George answered the door in workout clothes, sweaty from his home gym, and his expression shifted the moment he saw her face. "What did you do?" Her voice came out strangled. "Janet. The police called. David filed a restraining order. Against me." She pushed past him into the foyer. "What did you do?" George's jaw tightened. "I had people talk to him. Make it clear that coming near you again would be inadvisable." "Inadvisable." She laughed, the sound bitter. "You mean threatened. You had him threatened, and now he's lying to the police, and I'm the one who'll pay for it. The restraining order won't stick. I have lawyers." "You have lawyers." Janet's voice rose. "You can't just fix everything with money and threats, George. That's not protection, that's control. I'm protecting you the only way I know how." He stepped closer, but she backed away. "Don't you see? Your world is more dangerous than the one I was running from. David could hurt me physically. Your world could destroy everything, my job, my reputation, my freedom." Her throat tightened. I could go to jail for association with whatever you had your people do. That won't happen. I made sure. You made sure. The words tasted like ash. You took over my life without asking. Without considering that I've survived 3 years on my own. That maybe I know how to handle my own problems. George's expression cracked, something raw showing through. I care about you. I couldn't stand by and let him hurt you. Caring doesn't give you the right to make decisions for me. Janet grabbed her purse, hands still trembling. I need time. Space. I need to think without you overwhelming everything. Janet, please. Just, give me time. She was already moving toward the door, feeling his eyes on her back like a physical weight. How much time? His voice was quiet, lost. I don't know. She left him standing in his fortress, and it felt like falling. 5 days of silence. George kept his word, didn't call, didn't text, gave her the space she demanded. Janet should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow, like something essential had been carved out of her chest. She went through her routines, the Brookline brownstone on Tuesday, the Back Bay penthouse on Thursday. She avoided Beacon Hill, couldn't bear the thought of cleaning those rooms without him there, filling them with his presence. Premier Home Services didn't question it when she asked for reassignment. They rarely asked questions. Her studio apartment in Dorchester had never felt smaller. She caught herself listening for footsteps that wouldn't come, turning toward the door expecting to see him. At night, she lay awake replaying their last conversation, his raw expression when she'd walked away. The restraining order had been dismissed within 48 hours, George's lawyers, undoubtedly, and David had apparently left the city. She should be grateful. She was mostly terrified of how easily George had made her problems disappear. In his Beacon Hill mansion, George functioned on autopilot. His assistant noted he'd missed 3 meetings. His driver commented he seemed distracted. Marcus, his head of security, watched him stare at his phone for 20 minutes during a crucial negotiation and later pulled him aside. Whatever's going on, boss, you need to handle it. You're making mistakes. George knew. The mansion felt like a mausoleum without Janet moving through it, humming Chopin, arranging flowers in unexpected places. He'd had everything in his life, power, money, control, and none of it mattered because the one genuine thing had walked away. On the 5th night, at 2 a.m., he broke. He stared at his phone for an hour before typing, I miss you. Tell me how to make this right. In her apartment, Janet's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She read the message once, twice, her heart hammering. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Tell him it's impossible. Tell him their worlds don't work. Tell him she's better off alone. Tell him she misses him too. Before she could respond, someone pounded on her door, hard, urgent, the kind of knock that meant trouble. Janet's blood froze. Through the peephole, she saw him, George, disheveled in a way she'd never witnessed, hair mussed, shirt partially untucked, looking nothing like the controlled crime boss and everything like a desperate man. She opened the door. I can't do this, he said, voice raw. 5 days of pretending I can function without you. I can't. George pushed past her threshold, and the contrast was stark, this powerful man in her tiny studio with its second-hand furniture and peeling paint. He looked around like he was cataloging every detail, seeing how she really lived, and something in his expression cracked. 20 years I've built walls around myself. He paced her small space like a caged animal. Brick by brick, deal by deal, until I was untouchable. Then you walked into my life, humming classical music and arranging cheap flowers, and you saw past everything I pretended to be. He stopped, facing her. And suddenly all those walls feel like a prison. George. I'm terrified, Janet. The admission seemed to cost him. Because you've become my weakness. In my world, that's fatal. But I don't care anymore. I'd rather be vulnerable with you than invulnerable without you. Her throat tightened. Your world could destroy me. The violence, the danger, the things you do. Then I'll change my world. He closed the distance between them. I'll restructure everything. Go legitimate. Walk away from it all if that's what it takes. You'd give up your empire? I'd give up everything for you. The words hung between them, raw and honest, and Janet realized he meant it. This man who controlled a city with an iron fist was offering to dismantle his entire life for her. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating and utterly transformative. I don't want you to give up who you are. She reached for him, her hand trembling as it touched his face. I want to be brave enough to love you anyway. You love me. His voice cracked on the words. God help me, I do. Tears burned her eyes. All of you. Even the complicated, dangerous parts. Even knowing it might destroy me. George pulled her against him, one hand cradling her head, the other at her waist. It won't. I swear to you, Janet, I'll spend every day proving you're safe with me. She kissed him, desperate, claiming, letting go of every fear that had kept her isolated. He responded with equal intensity, lifting her off the ground as she wrapped around him. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. I'll protect you, he whispered fiercely, but I'll never control you. We'll face this together. Your choices, your agency, always. I promise. Together, she agreed, and felt something fundamental shift. The fortress walls, both his and hers, crumbling into something new. Something like home. They spent the weekend in her apartment, talking until dawn, mapping out what their future could look like. George was honest about his world, the businesses that couldn't be easily abandoned, the alliances that required careful dismantling, the enemies who'd see any change as weakness. David first, he said Sunday morning over coffee. But you decide how we handle it. Janet appreciated the shift, the recognition of her agency. Together they crafted a solution, a legal settlement in exchange for David leaving the state, enforceable contracts, George's lawyers handling everything above board. No threats, no violence, just the weight of resources used ethically. David signed within 48 hours and was gone by Friday. The restructuring of George's empire took longer. He started divesting from the shadowy operations, strengthening the legitimate businesses. Some allies understood. Others didn't. Marcus cornered Janet one evening at the mansion, his expression hard. He's making himself vulnerable for you. I know, she said quietly. If you hurt him. I won't. She met his eyes. But I won't let him hurt himself for me either. We're building something different. Together. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. He needs different. Janet met George's inner circle gradually, the men who'd built the empire with him, who now watched him transform it. She saw the complexity she'd missed, loyalty that ran bone deep, protection extended to families and communities, a code that was brutal but not arbitrary. It didn't excuse everything, but it was more nuanced than she'd understood. George, in turn, saw her world. He sat in her small apartment learning why she chose second-hand books over new ones, why classical music mattered, why invisibility had been survival. He met her few friends, listened to her dreams of maybe someday opening a small business. He didn't try to solve everything with money, just listened, present and genuine. Move in with me, he said one night, 3 months after that midnight confession. Not as my maid. As my partner. George. Marry me. He pulled her close. Not just marriage, partnership in every sense. Your name on the businesses I'm building. Your voice in every decision. Your influence making me better. His thumb brushed her cheek. Let me spend my life proving you made the right choice. Janet thought about fortresses and freedom, about risk and worth, about a man who'd offered to dismantle his empire for love. Yes, she whispered. to all of it. 14 months later, Janet stood in the Beacon Hill mansion, their home now, arranging flowers in the foyer. Not grocery store bouquets anymore, though she still chose them herself, still insisted on the ritual. The business card in her pocket read, Crowell and Associates, Estate Management and Design, her company that paired former service workers with wealthy clients who wanted homes, not showpieces. George watched from the doorway in his tuxedo, bow tie undone, looking at her like she was everything. "You're staring," she said without turning. "Can't help it. You're beautiful when you're concentrating." She turned, smiled. His shirt was open at the collar, revealing the edge of new ink, her initials in elegant script over his heart. She wore his grandmother's ring and a dress that cost more than her old monthly rent, but she was still fundamentally herself. The gathering downstairs was a collision of worlds that somehow worked, Marcus and his wife laughing with Janet's former co-workers, George's business partners discussing real estate development that actually included affordable housing, the warmth of genuine connection filling rooms that had been cold for decades. Later, after everyone left, George found her on the balcony overlooking the city. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he murmured. "Only that I wasted 8 months invisible when I could have been seen by you." He turned her in his arms, hands framing her face. "I see you now. Every day for the rest of our lives." Janet touched his face, thumb tracing his jawline. "And you've never been more visible to me, the real you, not the fortress." She leaned up, kissed him softly. "Thank you for tearing down your walls. Thank you for teaching me how." He pulled her closer, both of them looking out over the city that had tried to keep them in separate worlds. The mansion behind them was no longer a fortress. Janet had transformed it with opened windows and warm colors, classical music drifting through rooms that now felt lived in. George had transformed his empire, building something cleaner, though no less powerful. But the greatest transformation was simpler. Two people who'd hidden themselves for survival had learned to be seen. In a world that had tried to keep them separate, they'd found a way to be completely, perfectly together. And for the first time in their lives, both George and Janet felt entirely, utterly home. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and leave a comment. Your support truly means the world to us. And trust me, the next story is even more gripping, packed with twists you'll never see coming. Just click the image on your screen now and dive into the next episode. You won't want to miss it.